Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hall of Fame. In this particular episode, we are going to be talking about feminism in the digital age. And my name is Diana Navimanya. I work with FarmFort. I'll be your host today. Also, I'll be the person having a conversation with our special guest here. And I'll let our guest introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Lydia Namoville. I am a Ugandan feminist and journalist.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is pretty modest.
I'm satisfied.
Lydia Namubiru is one of the finest journalists this continent has. And for those that don't know her, you may do well to research and find out who she is. And
To be starting, to be coming to know yourselves in a time when such a big chunk of social life and public life is broadcast on the internet. It is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the sense that I don't think we've ever been as connected with each other as we are now, which makes it a lot easier to build community, to find people who think like you, no matter how unusual or your thinking might be at a particular time or in a particular context. So I don't think we would have been able to, I don't think I personally would have been able to meet the African feminists that I have met, the queer feminists that I have met in my life, if it hadn't been for this ease to connect to each other across space and across time in some sense. But it is also a chaos because I think feminist politics is a journey and you grow and every feminist will say they are so ashamed of who they were 5 years ago, all the ways in which they hadn't become, the feminists they are now. And now you do that in a very public manner. And I don't think broadcasting your thought process, it can be affirming in the moment, but it can also be a trap in which you feel that what you said last year, because it was public, because it's recorded, because somebody can search for it and reproduce it, is the position you must hold going forward. It can also be a trap in the sense that it's that same connectivity that we have to each other means even the people who are opposed to us, the people who would like to distract from us becoming more feminists, from us reaching each other as feminists, are also watching. They have more access to us than they ever had. So so the backlash is much more direct, it's much more intense, it's relentless, which can also be a disincentive for saying what you mean, changing, saying something else if you've grown and your thinking has evolved away from one thing to another. But I think at the end of the day, it's still I think it's a net positive to be here and now. I think all technology dramatically changes how we relate to each other. The printing press changed how people related to each other. Now we can't imagine a world in which we didn't have papers and journalists and whatever and all of that. I think the internet changed how we relate with each other. I think especially here in a country like Uganda, where it's not yet universal, and also a lot of people don't have it all the time. There's still some like awkward awkwardness, strange ways in which people are interacting with that technology, a certain level of performance, a certain level of hyperbole in how people, are feeling it out and presenting themselves, a certain level of inauthenticity, certain level, of aggressiveness, and also a certain sense of scarcity that people think, a lot of people who think, for instance, who make their money by being on the internet, like influencers and stuff, think that attention on the internet is a limited resource, and will constantly fight anybody who's trying to be heard on that platform, because, or either because it helps them. So it is mixed. It's quite mixed, but I still think it's a net positive. I think when you're growing, it's funny because I think people react to feminists, especially online, as if these feminists were attacking them or preaching to them, evangelizing to them. But in my experience, my own feminist journey, the most important thing has been finding people who think like me. So I feel less crazy. So I feel less scared about pursuing the life I want to pursue, about thinking of myself and presenting myself in the world in the ways I want to present myself. And that being able to connect with others has been worth all the harassment. And I think more than it was when we first started using the internet. I first started using Twitter, for instance, for feminism around 2016. And the reason I started using it for feminism is I was at a human rights conference, and it's saw a panel, people talking about activism in the digital age. No, it's not 2016. And a feminist on that panel said that the most harassed, trolled people on Twitter after NRM influencers were feminists. And I was quite taken aback because, in 2016, I didn't think feminism is controversial. By that point in my life, I thought, it is what any self-regarding woman is, right?
Yeah.
So to learn that there is a universe in which young women are beaten, harassed, pushed out of the space simply for being feminist was really like astounding to me. So like, no, this let's go and shout and push back. And when I started then using Twitter, I was astounded by the sheer misogyny,
Yeah.
and how it was celebrated. Some of the biggest voices on Twitter then were men who were in fact cartoonishly misogynistic. And these were the people that had the biggest followings that everybody wanted to include in every conversation. I was astounded by that. I saw for the first time a level of sexism and misogyny in Uganda that I think I am shielded from in my private life. Within months, I was blocking people I knew in real life because they were absolute. Can I swear on this? Right. Absolute word that
And I think
probably, yeah.
that happens a lot, given I think social media gives people some sense of confidence to air out things I think they already feel but cannot say in person, or maybe feel like if they said them in person, they would be looked at a certain way. But when they're on social media behind the keyboard, they're thinking, it's easy to type this out and forget that outside there you're going to meet them. And so I
Right.
think
As
maybe
a
that was
journalist, I
why.
find that both heartbreaking
Yeah.
and fascinating because that's not what I would think people would use confidence for, right? as journalists, we think give people platforms to speak, give people, like we imagine that what's in people's minds is constructive, communal, collective. Let's do this. Let's make our country better. Let's make our society better. Let's be nicer to each other. Let's be healthier to each other. So I was, yeah, it was very, it was also more than as a feminist. I think as a feminist, I have always, even though I'm blessed to have like a life in which most people are respectful, reasonable, and I also have healthy boundaries. Like I won't know a person who is misogynistic for very long. Very quickly, there will be nothing to share between us, and we'll each go our own way. So, but I still understood that there was a certain amount of resistance to feminists, and that people do harass and abuse them.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the 90s Uganda, yeah, the time when Sylvia Tamale was voted Worst Woman of the Year. In the year, Ugandan newspaper readers of the New Vision voted Joseph Kony, a mass murderer, Worst Man of the Year. They voted Sylvia Tamale, a feminist,
Yeah.
Worst Woman of the Year. I grew up in a Uganda in which people did strip women naked for wearing trousers. So I kind of knew that, for whatever unreasonable reasons,
Yeah.
people are hostile to feminists. I didn't expect it to be in the year 2016 then. I didn't expect it to be quite what it was on Twitter when I first started. But I was, as I think a journalist, I was a bit more idealistic
Yeah.
about public voice. That I imagined if we have a public square in which everybody can say what they want, that would be a good thing. And I think being online disabused me of that idea. And I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing.
Speaking of joining in 2016, compared to where it is right now in 2024, do you think the space has improved, or is it even more brutal, like in your perspective?
I think it has improved for those of us who have stayed and insisted. But I imagine then that people will still find the young, budding voice and pile on it on those people. And I think, which is why it's really important to bring offline philosophies and ideas of feminist organizing online. Just building community, finding each other, backing up each other, looking out for each other. So finding which person, for their own unique reason, has been identified as easiest to bully, and then backing them up. If you're not, if people don't bully you as easily, have long given up trying to bully you, that sort of thing. Yeah, so I think it definitely, whether it's bad or worse, depends on who you are,
Yes.
how long you've been there, how solid your blocking practice is.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it depends on all of that.
In our previous episode, we were talking about movement building and in general. And for this episode, since we are talking about feminism in the digital age, we're wondering how does this help in movement building and shaping the feminist spaces specifically, like for us, especially feminists who are budding and maybe people who would, for the people that will come after us and for the people that were before us, like how does this help in the shaping of the movement, especially on like maybe the campaigns, say like the Me Too. I'm wondering how do these help in shaping the movement?
I think whoever it is you're doing feminism for, yourself and others, it's important to recognize that they'll spend a huge amount of their life online, whether they're there for feminism or they're there to look for jobs or they're there to, just follow the national conversation. They spend a huge amount of their life online. So I think if feminism wasn't trying to then make that space safer, less toxic, more inviting, more productive for the people we do activism for, ourselves and others like ourselves, it would be a real, it would be a huge oversight. Like, so I think first and foremost, it should be done to make sure that, because women, gender non-conforming people are gonna be there, sexual minorities are gonna be there anyway. It's important to make that space, at least to create pockets in that space that are safe, and empowering and affirming to those people. It's in and of itself that feminism matters. But I also think people are very different. When, like, I remember, and I like to think I'm a feminist on and offline, but a big criticism of feminism online was that we were just talking. It's activism, which, you know, used to hurt my feelings because I'm a journalist. Even in all other things, I'm always just talking. And people are telling me it doesn't matter. You know, talking doesn't matter. But I think talking matters a whole lot. And a lot of people are going to be better talkers than they are, for instance, protest organizers, than they are, you know, even protesters. So that is important, that, you know, we invite people to do whatever it is that comes most naturally to them. A lot of people are introverted. I am. I'm not going to go to a workshop and speak a lot. I will try to, you know, at one point put up my hand, but I'm not likely to be the person who is leading the conversation and whatever. But if I can do it without putting myself through the whole, you know, be in physical space with people, and I mean, it's a way to, it's a way for people like us to contribute. But and it is, I think, like I say, it's like a lot easier with little resources to build across borders, to even to build across different parts of the city. I live in the city, and 6 months can go by without me crossing from the south to the north. Each time I think about the jam in the middle, I think it's not that.
So basically, you're talking about things like inclusivity. It's a space where at least everyone can have a say if they're willing to, which is a very, very good thing. You were saying something?
Sorry. I also think that thing that you say, that people behind the screen can say things they wouldn't say in real life. While trolls and misogynists and others and other bad actors take that to the extreme, I think it's actually really important in a movement for us to have a space in which we can say things to each other that we wouldn't say if we were in the same room, because there are things we need to say to each other. Like, I don't think I would say it to the feminist movement in the same room that I would call out their homophobia, for instance, as much as I can. Because in the same room, people might cry, people might get really angry. I don't know, maybe I would start fearing for my physical safety, because, you know, but those are things we need to say to each other.
A lot of bad blood.
Yes. Yes. There's things that I think the women's movement, having been here quite a while, there are certain settlements it entered with national power, with patriarchal power, that need to be questioned, pushed back at, hard, that might not be very feasible to do in physical space. So I think it is even that, like having a space in which we can say things to each other. I think about it in the same way I think about graffiti on city walls. There are things people write on city walls that they would never like own up to, but there are things we should know. If somebody is like absolutely mad, you know, but to say how mad they are would compromise their physical safety. It's good that there's a whole art form of writing on city walls to say, you know,
Whatever you need to say in that moment.
So I think so.
And I think I hear you a lot when you say it gives us the platform to say things we would never have said, because oftentimes you'll find you're maybe seated with someone who is probably, you know, a big person in that room or in that space and you cannot confront them directly.
Yeah.
But when you're on Twitter, it's easier because then,
Yeah.
you know, you're a bit firm.
When I sit in women's rights movement rooms, I'm not because I'm not in the organizing space. I'm mostly really just a journalist, so I don't quite know the power relations between people. But when you sit in a room, you can see already
Yeah.
the person whose jokes people just laugh at.
Yeah.
And eventually, you
Even the
very
unfunny
quickly
ones,
see
yes.
this must be the person to whom everyone's proposal goes to. But what if that's the person who's,
Yeah.
whom you want to call out?
Yeah, that is very, very true. And I think maybe as feminists, we also need to work on that within the movement to try and check ourselves because it's so hard for us to talk about things like safety and things like accountability. We are holding people accountable without holding ourselves accountable. How are we making these spaces safe for people to actually, criticize? Because criticism is okay, but I think that's just a point of self-reflection and for any feminist out there with wielding such power. But beyond that, I think I saw an article, I think you co-edited, about Roe v. Wade, and I just wanted a little bit of insight on how that maybe could play in the Ugandan scene and how that could affect us given the global nature of digital activism or the digital spaces.
And maybe we should explain what Roe v. Wade is, which is the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to roll back protection for women, federal level protection for women who want abortions. But I think it is a bit, I think we should be careful not to always frame ourselves within American politics. That has been really harmful. That to both see it, because Americans have a lot of money and they love to organize, they love to canvass, and everything they do will eventually, in some way, they'll bring their politics, and they know no national boundaries, even though they police their boundary, insanely. Even though they police their borders insanely, they know no other borders, right? If an American is very passionate about issue X, they will push it in the US, then start adventuring around for where else can I push it. Then they find Uganda, where people fancy themselves conservative Christian, whatever, regardless of how they live, and then they will push it there. So I think it is important to recognize that America, both because they have a lot of resources, and because they have a sort of power that they never need to worry about the sovereignty of other nations, the borders of other nations. They have the sort of power that they can just, for whatever reason, walk past Entebbe, come to Entebbe, ask for a tourist visa, then come here and start a campaign that takes away women's rights, that takes away LGBTIQ rights, even if they don't cross. If an American woman starts a WhatsApp group and says, I'm looking for these sorts of MPs, you'll be surprised. Our MPs will join just because the person who started the WhatsApp group is white. So I think we need to recognize that ongoing global empire mentality of Americans, and recognize that everything they do eventually reaches our shores, and they will want to remake our societies in their own image. And so when they do things, whatever things they do, we have to still to see them in that sense. We have to see the risk that what they've done, they will soon come campaigning on here. But at the same time, that too is a trap. Like to always see ourselves like, oh, the Americans have done this, now we need to change what we are doing because it's gonna happen. I think it's not entirely on us, especially as private individuals. I think our governments need to get they need to get some pride, right? and stop letting
Anyone.
adventurers in and out and, blowing us in this direction, but blowing us in the other direction. But I think as people who are protecting our rights, I also think that centering America too much is partly how we got here. Just letting our agenda be driven by events in the US. So Americans took away protection for abortion service, but in Uganda we've not had it. So I don't know what, if anything, we inspired American conservatives to be the worst they can be.
Yeah.
So I think the work that needs to be done here in Uganda remains the same, which is we've never had protection for women who would like to terminate their pregnancies. That's still the work that needs to be done. And we've been, women and gender non-conforming people have been marginalized, disempowered out of policies that are informed by white supremacist propaganda that calls itself Christianity, and that's still the work that needs to be done, right? We need to chip away at the extent to which our country, our culture, our own minds are captured by these external value systems that we've now named our own and are protecting.
Which is almost ironic because half the time we talk about culture,
But
if anything, but it's really borrowed culture.
yes,
And not something that is inherently ours. So
right. And we are human, we are alive, we are in a globalized world, we're going to borrow from other cultures. I just wish we were honest about it. I mean, like, we like this part, therefore, but it's naming it African culture. Like, why?
Yes.
Also, which Africans are you talking about?
yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I think the work remains the same regardless of what the Americans do for us. But I think the more success they have in their own domestic arena, the more bravado they have to come and adventure and spread the same things, the same ideas here. And here, those ideas can have a lot more impact on people's lives. I mean, America's democracy is still a complex system with lots of checks and balances that, there's enough organizing on both ends. There's enough progressive organizing to push back when they push really regressive things. Progressive organizers go to court. You don't have the same level of pushback here. You don't have the same level of resources here. You don't have a government that respects the checks and balances of democracy as well. You don't have institutions that see themselves as independent enough from the executive or, from each other, not, for one to check the other. So I think if Americans come, spread these ideas because they've been encouraged by success on their own, even if that success is temporary on their own here, their success may not be temporary, and that would be really, really bad for the people whom they target, whose rights they target and take away.
Yeah, just like most of the things that they left behind
Right.
after colonialism, like lots of them still affect us to this day, and
Right.
it's long
We are
past.
still out here defending Christianity even after most of them have left it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That is an interesting one. I also wanted to talk about a specific area, which is journalism. There's been a problem with reporting, how especially they report issues that affect women, say sexual violence, just abuse in general. It's usually reported in a, I do not even want to call it a minimalist manner, but they report it and it's only the victim that is spoken about. Like they actually do not.
they report it as we talk about it in this culture, right? But I think we can talk forever about how the existing newspapers and radio stations cover cover women, LGBTQ people. But first we need to understand why those papers exist. Like many of those papers are just propaganda for power.
Yeah.
Many of those papers are just some rich man's vanity project. Many of them are like propaganda outlets for churches and other religious groups, pastors and stuff like that. No matter how unhappy you are and how much you shout at them, without changing how media, who owns media,
Oh, yeah, the power.
who owns that power, you're gonna have limited success. But again, going back to feminism in the digital age, the barriers of entry to media have really, really dropped. You don't need to rent an office building in which you put 200 journalists, and you don't need to buy super expensive printing press and every week import newsprint. We can create our own media. We can create the media we want to see in the world. We can teach people, we can teach even them by showing how better journalism looks like, but also we can give them incentive to change by taking away their audiences, by creating content that competes with them, takes away their audiences. We will have given them a commercial imperative to do better,
It was
which for as long as they have the power, they have the money, audiences don't have anywhere to go. They are captive because this is the only radio station. This is that reaches that part of the country. This is the only TV station that covers national affairs. The people inside there don't have any reason to change. I think but also, I mean, all the energy you spend shouting at a journalist who enjoys ignoring you as an exercise in power, you could spend doing what? Like reporting on that woman survivor in the way you think they should be.
Thank you very much. I think that is also something to think about as feminists, especially the ones that are in journalism and maybe the ones that have the power to create these spaces so we can at least move away from, like you said, move away from constantly having to beg, talk, appealing to their to their side of changing things, or maybe trying to beg them to change how they report. So I think as feminists, it's important for us to create these spaces other than just wanting to continuously just push back, because sometimes it's really not that effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if the thing is, if this we talk about this a lot in journalism in terms of fact checking and fake news, that you can't counter, like by countering a fake news piece, you're just like repeating it, right? Every time you pick a badly told story and treat it to add your comments to it, you've given that story even more mileage. So we should cut that and do what we think should be done.
Thank you very, very much. And I think we've come to the end of our session, but I am so, so, so happy to have finally met you and to hear from you. And I'm also very, I feel good for the people who are going to view, because this was great knowledge, this was great information. And please don't forget to subscribe. You see our handles on the screen. And thank you very much. See you guys next time.